But so let's just start with this. He said, quote, Eversley, "There's no appetite in our building to go young and just blow it all up. We've gone young. We've got players who are experienced to give us a greater opportunity to have a longer runway for sustainability to winning meaningful games for a longer time," end quote. He and or AK have said some version of that since they started making, the Caruso trade and the DeMar sign and trade.
Yeah.
And it's not about accumulating draft capital. They wanted young players who still have potential for improvement and growth, but who all have NBA experience, save, of course, the rookie Modest Buzelis. Mm-hmm. The part where I am losing Eversley here and their collective logic is when he says opportunity for a longer runway for sustainability to winning meaningful games for a longer stretch of time. You're kind of taking a couple of steps back without wanting to bottom all the way out to prioritize lots of lottery picks. I understand what he's saying there, but I don't know that this collection of young players with NBA experience will get them anywhere further than back to where they are now, which is kind of in the middle of the middle and not good enough to actually compete.
I see that point. I don't feel differently, but I guess I feel slightly differently because I don't know what they are, the young players. It's hard for me to make that assessment right now. I know Zach is. I know what those guys are, but
I think we do know,
Modest,
though,
but Modest, I don't know. And
sure, but like
a couple other guys, I honestly just don't truly know who they are, especially in roles that they haven't had before because DeMar's not there. So some of these guys are going to be in roles all season long that they've never been in. So, and being asked to do certain things that they've never really been asked to do. I don't know Josh Giddey's impact of what certain things will be on this Bulls team. I don't know what Lonzo's going to look like when he gets back. Like, for me, it's too many questions to go with that, but I'm not against it because I can see where your logic is on that. So it makes sense about what he's saying, about what you're saying.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, Dave, and I agree to a certain extent, but I also think that, like, if you really sit here and say you don't know what you have in these guys, it's ignoring some of the negative things that we know about them, right? Mm-hmm. It's ignoring Giddey getting played off the floor in the playoffs and not starting second halves and being a complete zero on offense if he doesn't have the ball in his hands. Mm-hmm. It's ignoring the fact that, you were going to have the 11th pick anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, that rookie isn't like this new foundational piece because it's like he would have been here regardless of whether they kept DeRozan and Caruso and moved on from Zach. Like, that, to me, that's not like really they've eliminated two pieces and brought in Jalen Smith. That's kind of the roster this year.
Wait, are you looking at this that I'm saying this is a good thing, that they could be good?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying,
okay, go ahead.
I'm saying not at all. I'm saying, like, I think when Mark says there's no appetite in our building to go young and just blow it all up, he's basically banking on this obviously small sample size, but multiple seasons in some cases of information about some of these players and banking on the fact that they can change and improve in this new context. And I don't think that's like a wrong thing, but I do think it necessarily ignores some of their flaws in saying we got a 21-year-old that we can build around. It's like that ignores the fact that he's clearly a flawed player and that you have to pay him to the point where he's not going to be a value contract anymore. And so I think you're right, Matt. Like, ultimately, and I said this on the show with Mark, I think I did a good job for, like, kind of the first time really articulating my full kind of thoughts on the way. On the back? I mean, no, it's more of the opposite. Like,
self-flex. Yes, it is.
It's more the opposite. I don't think I've done a good enough job explaining my thoughts on this, but I think on that show on Friday, I did a much better job to explain where and how I feel about the direction things are going. And ultimately, I think they've opened up more doors for themselves. Remember, we used the analogy of, like, there's 100 doors, and they used to only have 5 that got them towards a title. Now maybe they have 20 or 25, and that's nice, but it's still a very small section of the entire spectrum. Sure. And they could have 50 or 75 doors opened that could have taken them in those different pathways. And I think when you try to take these shortcuts and build this way, more likely than not, you're going to end up in the middle. And that's where they're trying to get out of right now. Right. And so building a new thing that gets them back to where they are, it's like, well, what are we doing? So I'm not saying that they don't have any avenues towards being a better team, because I think they do. I just think the line they're walking is a really challenging one. It's going to require like a higher degree of accuracy on all of their picks and all of the guys that they bring in, because they don't have enough like ammunition to like take multiple shots. And so I think that's a really risky way to do it. And I think, like I said, more likely than not, it's going to end up back in the middle, but at least it will be young and fun. That's great. But at the end of the day, like if you're trying to add 10 wins, which is what AK said, if you're trying to build a championship team, which is what AK said, are they really setting themselves up to do that right now? And like, I don't think they are.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, the reason I say I don't know, because I don't know if they're good enough to build themselves back up to get to the middle. That's why I keep saying I don't know what these young guys are. I don't know. They could come in and win 25 games. Yeah. Like I don't know. Like, I don't know if they're good enough to do that or not. And again, that's why I'm like, I got to see them in these positions to whether I can actually agree with them actually being a team that can end up in the middle. I can see how it could happen, but I'm like, I also can see how it couldn't, how they could be worse than that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's how I look at it. The other part is, did you hear how Will just said he can properly articulate his stuff only with Mark K? I think that's just what he told us right there, man.
He's a goat whisperer.
Yeah, that's what he is. He's
I love
out
that
Mark
episode,
K.
by the way.
Shout out.
It's great to see our guy Mark.
It was good to see him, man. Shout out to him.
But yeah, so like that's where I am, Dave. Like I can see a world in which this new collection of young guys, collectively and as individual players, take some developmental steps and make some progress this upcoming season. And it might not mean a Bulls playoff season, but that they get better as a group and that they improve as individuals. I can also very realistically see maybe all of that happens and there is some improvement, but to get back to where you are now, which you needed DeMar DeRozan to do, you needed Alex Caruso to do. If you do eventually find a new home for Zach and or Vooch, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but then where are those other steps coming from? Because to me, and it goes to your whole like quick fix thing that you were mentioning, Will, as far as their earlier approach, and now that's put them in this position.
Steps,
The other part of that Eversley quote from Collier's report this morning saying, quote, I don't want to a year from now be winning 15 games and focusing on the lottery. We have an opportunity to roll out these younger players who give us an opportunity to turn this around, maybe not quicker, but in a more pragmatic approach than just looking at the future and building through the draft, end quote. Again, I see what Marc Eversley is saying, but just because you're not doing the hasty approach that you tried before that kind of backfired and saying, hey, pragmatic approach, let's build this thing slowly, then you're just talking about building something slowly that might still only get you back to the middle where you decided you didn't want to be.
Right. You did all this to get away from it. Right.
The place to get out of the middle when you aren't a team that could, spend like crazy because your owner doesn't want you to, doesn't let you, and you aren't, for whatever reasons, a big free agent destination, then what is the other direction of actually building it? And maybe it's pragmatic and maybe it's not a quick fix. It's going down and increasing your odds of bringing in, via the draft, a franchise-changing talent. And that is the part of Eversley's logic that I do not freaking get when I read these quotes.
He just walked back in.
I mean, that's exactly right. The whole point of being bad is to put yourself in a position to get a franchise-changing player in the draft. If you're going half-ass at that, you're going to end up with the 7th pick or the 10th pick, and that's exactly what they did from 2017 till 2020 when they realized that they weren't taking the right approach and they didn't have the stomach. So it's like nothing has changed to me. I think it's like repackaging the same product, and maybe you draw in a little bit more excitement with younger players. Maybe it's a little bit more exciting, and maybe you do have more upside because you have this younger group. But I think also like the salary cap element of this, you're going to have to pay these guys really soon. And then that takes away the free agency tool that you have to bring in that franchise guy. So if it's not going to be via the draft and you can't get this done before you have to pay Kobe and Giddey, then you can't do it on 2 of the 3 ways. You have to find a trade. And we just haven't seen them commit to getting A+ quality talent via the trade market. So I just don't see, and that's really a question I think we need to ask them at Media Day is like, okay, if you're not going to bottom out, if you are not going to be able to sign a guy in free agency because you want to keep your guys, how do you get a star player?
We all silly like the mayor.